talkSPORT chief football correspondent Alex Crook joins us live on the show this morning. Alex, good morning to you, mate. To say you've been ahead of the game all week is putting it mildly. And now we have a whole bunch of stories that I want to try and pile through with you. So Jim Ratcliffe planning a major reshuffle at Manchester United, we're told this morning in an exclusive by Matt Lawton in The Times, that we're told will lead to Sir Dave Brailsford reducing his commitment to Manchester United to return to his director of sport role for Ineos. What more can you add to that? Because Simon has had his take on this, and now you no doubt will as well.
Yeah, I think Simon's take is probably similar to a lot of Manchester United fans this morning. It didn't really sit right that a cycling expert had such a big influence on the day-to-day running of a football club. He's really been Sir Jim Ratcliffe's eyes and ears since Ineos came in as minority owners. He's been the one who's been most public around the training ground. He's attended more games than Ratcliffe himself. And I think really, and this was my immediate reaction when Matt broke the story last night, the way I see this is it hands more control to Omar Barada, the chief executive, and Jason Wilcox in particular as well. We expect him to be confirmed as Manchester United's new sporting director. Of course, that was a role that was filled for a very short time by Dan Ashworth before Sir Jim Ratcliffe, because of a personality clash, decided that maybe that wasn't the right appointment after all, despite spending several months and several millions of pounds to prize him away from Newcastle. Christopher Favell is in there as well as part of Jason Wilcox's recruitment team. And it's a massive summer, isn't it, for Manchester United in terms of players coming in. They've already signed Matheus Cunha for £62.5 million. They're trying to get Brian Mbeumo out of Brentford. And they need to move players on as well. And that was a source of frustration this time a year ago. I think that was one of the things that Dan Ashworth and Sir Jim Ratcliffe fell out about, the inability to get some of these big earners, and Casemiro in particular, off the wage bill. So it's going to be really intriguing to see how this turns out. At the moment, we're not expecting any external appointment to replace Sir Dave Brailsford's role. As I say, it's more likely that Jason Wilcox gets more power.
I mean, Brailsford's presence at United in the position he held there, Simon, attracted criticism in some quarters, and some of it came from you.
Well, my criticism was based upon Brailsford, not the function that he's been brought in to fulfil at Manchester United, because I'm not entirely sure most people are clear what that is. I would envisage it's a process-based scenario where he is bringing and implementing all the different facets of the systems they want to deploy, and then putting the people in place to manage these systems. So whether it's the data-driven analysis, whether it's the KPI reporting, whether it's all the different dynamics that they think that's needed to be put into place, and then installing the people in once those systems have been set up to run it properly. So when you look at player recruitment, you talk to sporting directors now, they'll tell you about the blueprints of how players should be bought and sold, specifically bought. And there's certain things like 59 points of how players are evaluated. And I think Brailsford's remit was to perhaps oversee that. My observations about Brailsford were based upon my view on how he was being characterised in the media and how he represented himself. And I said I felt in this space he was a bluffer. And I maintain that.
A bluffer?
That doesn't mean that he's not a capable operator. That means that he is not at the level that people were suggesting is required for Man United.
But a bluffer means that he was portraying himself to be something that he's not.
Or he was being portrayed that way by others. I mean, ultimately, does anybody? I mean, Alex, I'll ask Alex the question. Do you specifically and explicitly know the brief that Dave Brailsford was brought in, what his responsibilities were and what his tasks were?
Well, nobody's ever said that publicly, so that there's a lot of assumption on that.
My point.
I think when you look at Matt's piece, he talks about some of the improvements that have been made behind the scenes at Carrington, for example, to try and maybe act in a more professional manner. But yeah, I absolutely take your point. What Sir Jim Ratcliffe didn't do is sit down and say, well, this is what Dave Brailsford is going to do for me. As I say, I think really it was a scouting mission.
I just think he's he's an on-the-ground sporting interface between Jim Ratcliffe and the new sport that Jim Ratcliffe is playing with, which is football. And the new sport that Jim Ratcliffe is playing with in association with the Glazers, who are the real decision makers. Jim Ratcliffe is a minority shareholder that's put some cash in this business, that's doing the bidding of the main board, doesn't have any directorial responsibilities himself. So this idea that Jim Ratcliffe is making all these decisions is just bloody silly. But Brailsford was brought in, to some extent, to be an interface, because Jim Ratcliffe is not basing himself in Manchester. He's not basing himself every single day in the Manchester United environment. What he's doing is he's putting his man Brailsford in there to be able to set up the systems. And once the systems have been set up, go, right, we've got our head coach, we've got our sporting director, we've got our CEO, we've got the people that now represent the values that we've got. You've got all the systems that you require. The investment's been made. Now get on with it and start delivering under the KPIs you've been set.
So his role, if you like, is going to be somewhat different moving forward. Michael Carrick, meantime, at Middlesbrough, Alex, with all due respect to Michael, now has no role because he became the latest championship victim after 3 years with no promotion. He left the football club yesterday after being sacked at Middlesbrough. How important, Alex, is the next appointment? Because Middlesbrough, 10 years out of the top flight.
Yeah, it's a long time, isn't it, for a club of that stature? First and foremost, this is not a massive surprise. I think the writing has been on the wall for Michael Carrick for some time. I actually reported in February that they were considering making a change then. Their playoff bid seemed to have fallen by the wayside. They were going through a really poor run of results. To his credit, he did turn it around after that, and they were 20 minutes away from making the top six before they conceded a couple of late goals at Coventry and ended up missing out. I know Steve Gibson has thought long and hard about this decision. They wanted to put some distance between the end of the season and actually making the call whether to change manager out of respect for Michael Carrick. We know that Steve Gibson is an owner who traditionally and historically is very loyal to his managers. But as you say, 3 years, no promotion. I think probably the time was right to go in a different direction. And that direction could well be Steve Cooper. He was the name that I mentioned back in February when Carrick was under pressure. He's admired by the sporting director, so we're going to be keeping an eye on that one. John Dale Thomason, formerly of Blackburn, is another name that's been mentioned to me, but I think Cooper probably is most likely. And the other name in the frame, again, someone they looked at before Carrick was given the job, Rob Edwards, but you wonder where his stock is now after what happened at Luton. I know Bristol City are showing interest in him, and you wonder if he's ready quite yet to come straight back in.
My information, Alex, is that we can discount Steve Cooper. The information I have that it would be a polite no from him in that he hopes to go abroad, and he's currently a UEFA technical advisor. The stat that it throws up, Simon, is quite amazing, the Carrick stat. His departure means that 17 of last season's 24 championship clubs have changed managers since August last year.
That's the nature of the beast. I mean, Michael's had 3 years, so he hasn't not had a fair shake at it. I mean, I'm a big admirer of Steve Gibson. I'm very fond of him personally. I think he's an excellent chairman. Yeah. But there is a 10-year absence from the Premier League. They're not spending any money really. I mean, if you look at what they do, they recycle the money that they sell players for to reinvest back in the squad. So there's no great capital investment. There's no questioning of Steve Gibson's capabilities of an owner here. But the fact of the matter is, Middlesbrough, as a football club, being out of the Premier League for 10 years with an owner as forward-thinking and as committed as Steve Gibson is not the optics that you'd expect. I mean, we've seen other clubs be out for a long time, Nottingham Forest and Sheffield Wednesday and other sides that have been out for significant periods of time. But there's also been an inconsistency in the boardroom, different challenges for different reasons at those football clubs, whereas Steve's been there for 30 years.
Yeah.
He's incredibly wealthy, incredibly successful, incredibly driven, massive supporter of the football club, gave Carrick an opportunity. But when it comes to spending money with him, he spends what he recoups. So they've gone and spent something like 75 million over the last 3 years and brought in 75 million quid. Don't know what the wages structure's like, but it wasn't so long ago that Carrick was being touted for every job in the Premier League.
You're right. Yeah, right. This is true. Alex, we'll finish with you if we can, my friend. Chelsea, interested in Mohamed Kudus, am I right? And Mbeumo to Manchester United, is that gathering pace?
Well, Mbeumo is certainly gathering pace. That the first bid from United has gone in, 45 million plus 10 million add-ons. Brentford say they want a lot more than that. As I mentioned to you, I think yesterday, they see him in the same bracket as Matheus Cunha. Wolves got £62.5 million of him, so I think United will have to cough up a similar fee. In terms of Kudus, this is an interesting one because I think West Ham are more than willing to cash in on him this summer to provide funds to Graham Potter for a rebuild. Chelsea, we know they're in the market for a wide player. They like Jamie Gittins at Borussia Dortmund. They like Nico Williams, but he's going to be hard to get out of Spain. They like Alejandro Garnacho. And now I'm told this morning an offer has gone in from Chelsea for Kudus that would have involved Robert Sanchez, the goalkeeper, and Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall going in the opposite direction. West Ham have dismissed that. I think they prefer the straight up front cash.
As you know, one of the many who listen to this show on a regular basis and is very complimentary about it, I'm delighted to say, is father of Jack Grealish, Kevin Grealish, and I keep in touch with Kevin quite a lot. I wonder what Kevin's thinking at the moment, because at the moment, his son Jack set to be left out of City's squad for the Club World Cup. Of course, he's dropped out the picture in terms of playing for England. He has missed out in the past 3 England squads and looks set to move on from City to revive his career ahead of next year's World Cup. It seems like now, more than at any other time, Jack Grealish is heading off to another club. But the question is, I would say, why? Because when he joined there, it was a hugely much publicised move that hit every headline, because City had triggered the release clause, had pushed the button, 100 million, and off he went in 2021 to City. But it hasn't worked out. Why hasn't it worked out?
Well, it has worked out in certain respects. I mean, there were times during Jack's tenure there where I felt he was going great guns. I mean, you look a couple of seasons back where Jack has changed as a player. He's adapted. This idea that he only plays one way, I think he worked very hard for the side. I remember watching him
at Arsenal. We were
Arsenal,
there that
absolutely,
night.
and seeing Jack doing a lot of work with the team that perhaps in the previous guys he wouldn't have either been asked to do. So he had morphed into a Guardiola player. I was listening to stuff this morning on the breakfast show where people were talking about Jack Grealish's lifestyle as perhaps something that wasn't liked. What is Jack Grealish's lifestyle? I mean, I don't see Jack Grealish potentially stepping out and behaving in a fashion which is not appropriate. I mean, we've seen him a couple of times this season, early on in the season where he staggered out of some bar in Newcastle, wasn't it, or somewhere or another. But as long as you're performing on the field, I don't think it really matters. And obviously the argument will be Jack clearly isn't. And of course, because he's a £100 million transfer, because there's a fascination with Jack Grealish, because there's a legacy in the past where Jack was seen to be a bit of a lad, it carries with him throughout his entire career. So it doesn't matter what he does now. It doesn't matter how he conducts his life. There'll always be that question thrown up in the air, which I think is slightly unfair. Do I think he's reached the end of the road with Man City? Probably. The question is, what happens next? Yeah. And where does he go? People will make the lazy assumption that it's automatically Aston Villa.
You don't think it would be?
Well, I'm not sure that's right. Time will tell us. I don't know if he is an Unai Emery player, whether Unai Emery sees him fitting into the current framework of what he's built there. If he does, then the answer will be that he'll go potentially to Villa. Yeah. And it all comes down to money, how much Jack wants to play. I mean, he's not playing for England because he's not playing for Manchester City. And we constantly hear this overused expression about Hughes. I don't know any other part of the world where people use the terminology fuming so many times. I mean, apparently Jack Grealish was fuming because he didn't come on against Crystal Palace. And he was fuming because he hasn't been selected to go to the World Club Championship, and he's fuming because of that. The fact of the matter is, if he is now out of favour with Man City because Pep feels that there's a rebuild needed and Jack doesn't fit the purpose, it's about what he does next and where he goes next. And it'll be fascinating to see what the quantum of transfer would be, what Jack's attitude to taking a view on his salary, because he must take a view on that. And, if it is Aston Villa, where would Jack want to play? I'd like to perhaps see him go abroad. For him as a person, I think it would develop him as an individual, give him an opportunity to live his life out of the focus of certain aspects of the media, and just play his football.
Look at Messrs Gilmore and McTominay for a start. We head on, never mind the Club World Cup, we head on and into a couple of internationals for England. England are playing a couple. They're playing Andorra in a World Cup qualifier, and then they're playing Senegal, of course, in a friendly. Part of Thomas Tuchel's squad is one Ivan Toney. And we know what happened with Ivan Toney. He headed on out to Saudi Arabia, and he joined Al Ahly in August for £40 million. In that time, Toney, ex-Brentford, of course, has scored 30 goals in 44 games in all competitions in Saudi Arabia. Now, Faker Others, talkSPORT's England correspondent, caught up with Ivan Toney yesterday. And it was interesting, this, because they spoke about Saudi Arabia. They spoke about his decision to go there and play for Al Ahly. And we'll get to what he's earning per week in a second. But this was Toney with Faye pushing back on the perception of the league's ability, or lack of it, to be looked upon as a credible league.
The standard's high. I always say this, people always judge it on not seeing it, and you have to see it firsthand to have your own opinion. And I mean, if people went there and went and watched some games, they'd soon realise, But yeah, I know the standard. I know it's a good standard. You would never knock it once you've been there, and Yeah, it is tough.
Should we believe Ivan? The standard's high. Don't knock it. You've got to get out there, watch it. Then you'll believe me, and you'll agree the standard's high.
But what's Ivan's alternative answer? Which is, it's not very good. I'm over there picking up a big bag of money for not having to do that much. That's his alternative answer. I mean, I've no doubt that the standard is getting better and better, and they have every right to develop their league. They are not. It's not comparable to the significant European leagues. And Ivan's playing in a league. I mean, I, as you know his father relatively well and spent some time talking to them last year about what they could and should be doing. And I advised them to take control of their own destiny, given all the moving parts in this deal. Control what you want to do. If one of the key factors in your life is securing your financial future, then take the decision, because the Saudis are going to give you that.
So you advised them to go out there?
Well, based upon all the moving parts and what that Brentford wanted for the deal and what they wanted to achieve, and the deal that they had with David Benassi and Jonathan Barnett and all those different people, all those different parts, all those people that were involved in that deal that were seeking to have an opportunity.
So he used them as his representative?
So all the people that were involved,
all right.
His father himself, all his aspirations, all the things, there was all the different aspects of this deal which led it to the financial opportunities that Saudi produced, right? But the fact is that it is not the same level. And if you're asking Ivan to operate at the highest level, we often talk about, and it's often spoken of, that in order to operate at the highest level, you need to play against the highest level. And when you're coming into international duty, Andorra, fine, you go compare Ivan Toney's experiences in Saudi to playing against Andorra. Of course you can. When we get to the World Cup and we've got better opposition, we need strikers that are playing against the best week in, week out to be able to raise their level. Ivan Toney is a player that I really like and have always liked, and I'd love to have seen him stay in English football and play for one of the bigger clubs. There was various perspectives on him about the fact that maybe his game was in decline. I think that was Tottenham's view, that he couldn't do the things that they would want him to do, hence the reasons why they didn't go for him and they went for Dominic Solanke. And people can dispute that and refute that and have their own view about reasons why Daniel might have gone a different direction. But the fact of the matter is that Saudi football is not at the level that you want your top international footballers to be playing at. I think that's universally accepted. Yeah. Ivan's gone over there. He scored 30 goals in 44 games. We've seen Mitrovic go over there and score 69 goals in 78 games. So we know they can go score goals over there. But we also know that it's unarguable. Yes, of course, you can pull it out. You can pull the rabbit out of the hat and say, well, unless you've been to see it. Well, I went to America and I watched the American leagues and I sat with the MLS that were telling me in no short order that they believed that their league was going to be one of the big five leagues inside the next decade, and not by the standard that I saw over there. Right. We sat with Mark Warburton the other day, and he described the standard, and obviously he was being diplomatic because he's over there working and plying his trade there. Yeah. But that's a league that has Messi playing in it, and other players like Suarez, and whoever else they've got over there. And the standard over there is a mile off, and the standard over Saudi is a mile off in comparison with the European Super Leagues.
Well, I mean, the Saudis would boast Cristiano Ronaldo, of course. So what? N'Golo Kante. Neymar. The fact of the matter is this, though.
Fantastic.
And we've got to bear this in mind. In Opta's most recent power rankings, the Saudi Pro League was ranked as just the 29th strongest in the world, just behind the Ecuadorian Liga Pro.
I don't know what their measurements are. And, you know, when I used to look at things like years ago, Sunday Times Rich List, and when I featured in it 25 years ago and I didn't have two halfpennies to rub together, and I went down to the ATM to check my bank balance because the Sunday Times seemed to know more than I did, I don't take much notice of it. When I used to look at the Deloitte's list and think, well, what exactly you're measuring these things against? Now, Opta are bringing out statistics, and they may well be right, and it may support my argument that it's not a powerful league. Yeah. But I don't, again, it's about the measurements of it. I would again make the point, Ivan's been called up, and that's great, and I'm pleased for him. And the fact that Tuchel is prepared to do that, because he shouldn't exclude anything from the situation. What he's doing is he's sifting. There's gold in them hills. He's going to go through everybody and sift and see what squad he can build to win a World Cup, because that's his sole focus in life. And he should not leave any stone unturned. And if Toney comes back and rips it up against decent international sides, then sod it who he's playing with in Saudi. If he can do that. But in order to do that, he has to play him. And playing him against Andorra is not going to be the same as playing him against XYZ major country in the World Cup.
Of course, Faye spoke to Toney about recent events, such as Bruno Fernandes saying a polite no thanks to going to the Saudi Pro League. And this was Toney's reaction to that.
Well, that's his decision. I mean, he maybe thinks it's different to me. He obviously hasn't seen the league, which respects his decision, and I can't say much more on that. It's up to him.
The fact is, I mean, Ivan will cling to this, with all due respect to him. He hasn't seen the league. Bruno hasn't seen the league. And you've got to see the league before you make a decision, before you opinionate. The fact is, Ivan will defend it because there's 400 grand a week.
well, whatever he's on, I don't know if he's on that much, but whatever he's on significant money. And of course, he's coming from Brentford. So with due respect to what he's on Brentford, it was probably about 60, 70 grand a week tops. If he's gone up to 250, 300 grand a week, if that's indeed where he's at, which I think it probably is,
probably more,
then he's on 6 times the money, and he's also got the ability to behave perhaps tax-free. Bruno Fernandes is playing for Manchester United. Bruno Fernandes is already earning £200,000 or £300,000 a week. Bruno Fernandes may not want to spend 3 years in Saudi to achieve the tax status that gives you all of your money net. And so that you don't have to pay any tax on that.
Yeah.
And also, he's used to playing at elite football club, and with respect to Ivan, he's not. So Ivan's exchanged Brentford, which is a very well-run football club by a brilliant owner, managed by a brilliant manager, producing really good players that are now being coveted by other football clubs. But it's a whole different ball game when you're a Manchester United player. And just because Man United stink right now doesn't mean that playing for Man United is comparable to playing for Brentford and finding your way into a generational wealth creation opportunity for you that Bruno Fernandes has already got.
As you rightly say, though, Simon, if Ivan comes back and shows himself on the pitch wearing an England shirt to have been a better version of what he was before he left for Saudi Arabia, then sure.
But I'd be amazed if that's the case.
But his club, Al Ahly, 5th in the Saudi Pro League.
Yeah.
Al Ittihad won it.
Sure. I have to say, I don't spend my time studying Saudi football because I have very little interest in it.
Yeah.
I spent some time with Robbie Fowler, who's been over there and managed it, and he was of the impression that the standard's getting better, but it's still some way off. And so, in fairness to Ivan Toney, he is hardly going to sit in front of an international audience on international weeks and bite the hand that undoubtedly feeds him.
Yeah.
So he has to be diplomatic. He knows that it's not the same standard, but it's whether the deployment of Ivan Toney via Thomas Tuchel can move past the fact that he's not operating at the highest level week in, week out, and deploy him in such a way where he's effective for England. And if he is, then who cares what standard of football he's in?
Oh, no, I agree. Yeah. Are you still on the Sunday Times rich list?
No, I shouldn't think so.
What a wonderful moment that meant. There I am.
712th.
I knew I'd made a few quid. Simon.
I'm disappointed today because I prioritised the show. There's a paddle tournament in London, which I won the inaugural Pro-Am tournament 2 years ago.
Of course you did.
And I was invited to play in this tournament, but I was going to play, and I put Gabby Abonglahor in there to play.
Yeah.
So I can't make it because of the timings, because obviously I'm doing the show today. So I'm a bit concerned that Gabby is our envoy.
All right.
He's our representative.
Who's going to play in it?
So he's carrying the flag.
Right. Okay.
So he doesn't fill me with a great deal of confidence.
He's a strong boy. He's a strong boy there as we came in.
But if the prowess of his game is commensurate with the prowess of his broadcasting, this is a first round defeat for us.
Gabby will stand in admirably for you. I wonder if Russell Martin's Rangers career is going to get off to as positive a start. Russell Martin has his 4th job as head coach as the club's new American owners begin their reign. The former Southampton boss has signed a 3-year deal, and he'll be speaking in around an hour or so. And actually, on this show, you'll hear him in his new position as Rangers boss for the very first time. Funnily enough, I don't know if you did this, Simon, when you parted company with one of your managers and you heard that he's got a job elsewhere. Did you ever send a message of good luck? Dragan Solak, the Southampton owner, and of course parted company with Russell not that long ago, sent me a message. I believe and hope Russell will have great success with Rangers. Really happy for him to land such a high-profile job. It is absolutely the right fit for him and a great opportunity for him to develop as a manager. I always considered him to be a smart and talented manager with a great career ahead of him, and I really hope that he's going to prove me right.
Yeah, I mean, I always used to wish the future employers of my managers good luck, given the fact that I'd fired them. No, I didn't indulge myself in, if I fired somebody, I didn't spend my time wanting to comment on what they did next.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the Boys in Breakfast put out what they thought you had said about Russell Martin. You said something quite different to me yesterday. What did you say about Russell?
It's an interesting dynamic how people choose to hear things. What I said was it's an interesting idea that a manager that's ostensibly been successful in the Championship translates to manage a big club like Rangers. Is that what we're talking about? I think the interesting thing is, whenever I fired or hired a manager, whenever I did a press conference, what I tried to do and what I wanted to do was explain my reasons behind appointing them whilst they were sat next to me.
Right.
And I think we can all ruminate as to what there may well be, the thinking behind it. But the most interesting question would be to ask the Rangers top brass, why Russell Martin. And it was always asked of me, whenever I sat in press conferences, I was always asked by one of the journalists, why Neil Warnock? Why Steve Bruce? Why Ian Dowie? Why Trevor Francis? Or whoever else it was.
Yeah.
And I would always have a reason behind it.
Yes.
And I don't know if we've got any sort of understanding besides maybe stock answers as to the reasons why it might be Russell Martin.
Okay, it's a good point. And hopefully that question is going to be asked of the 49ers. We should be hearing from them for the first time this morning as well. So Russell Martin has come in. I looked this morning at social media, as we have to do these days. Believe me, I'm dragged to do that, dragged forward to do it. There's one from Marcus. Rangers isn't just a club, it's a force, a symbol of strength, tradition, and a sheer refusal to bow. We have been dragged through the mud, laughed at, written off, never folded, and now we build ruthless, relentless, unified. You've got the job, Russell. Now bring the steel. No excuses, no passengers, just results.
Okay, well, you literally did fold,
Yeah.
and got recreated. But that's me being pedantic. Look, I mean, again, I was listening to other arguments about who gets to manage these sort of clubs. And I was listening to one particular caller when I was coming in this morning in the breakfast show, getting it right out of his pram about the quality of manager going into Rangers and how embarrassing he thought it was to be and how underwhelmed he was. Well, who was overwhelmed by Ange Postecoglou going into Celtic then?
No, that's right.
What were the credentials that Ange Postecoglou exhibited from the magnificent clubs that he managed prior to Celtic that gave everybody such a feeling that such a big club like Celtic, imagine there was some, I think there probably was some recriminations, some rejection.
Right.
So when we talk about these big-time managers that are expected to go into these big-time Scottish clubs,
Yeah.
well, reel them off the tongue then. Who is it then? Because Gerrard wasn't a big-time manager, he was a big-time football player.
Yeah. Had anyone heard of Philippe Clement? Probably not. Michael Beale. Funnily enough, now here's one for you, Simon. You have been quite critical of Michael Beale for some of the decisions that he has made in the time that he has been a manager in the game. And of course, he's a former Rangers boss, one-time assistant at Rangers to Steven Gerrard. And yet, when I contacted Michael this morning, he said, yeah, I'll give you a reaction. Of course, I'm fair, and I'll do it now. So I spoke to former Rangers boss Michael Beale just before we came on air. He did give me his reaction to Russell Martin's appointment. And he also gave a message of his own to those who are unsure this morning about Martin's appointment.
Should go in there with the conviction and the bravery that he's shown to take the job. He's obviously believes in himself. He's a coach that has a real strong identity in terms of how he wants his teams to play, and the fans and everyone will need to be patient with the new ownership and Russell as the new coach as they build a new Rangers. I think everybody wanted to see Rangers with this new ownership and a new head coach moving in a new direction, so everyone should get behind Russell and his staff.
Mick, does he go in at a good time when it is, as you say, under new ownership?
Well, the expectation will be the same, but obviously with the new ownership, I think the last couple of managers have not had stability around them. That certainly won't be the case now for Russell and his staff as they go in. And I wish them every success. As I said, Russell's a coach that has a very set identity on the way that he wants his teams to play in terms of being possession-based. And given time, I think he can really move Rangers in the right direction.
And should he keep that belief, Mick, in how he wants Rangers to play, how he wanted Southampton to play? He stuck to it. Should he stick to his principles?
100%, because I believe that that's the way to go as a coach. If you really believe in something, then you should influence that into the club, and that's why he's obviously being hired. And I believe that he plays football in the right way. Possession-based, he wants to be the team that take the initiative, and I wish him every success, as I said, Jim.
Mick, finally, a 17-point gap between Rangers and Celtic at the end in favour of Celtic. He has a lot to do, doesn't he?
Yeah, stability is a big, big thing with Rangers, and there's been a lot more harmony at Celtic in the last decade, if you like. But the stability around the manager now and everybody moving forward, it's really important the fans get behind it. You know, that don't pick holes in things before Russell's had a chance to start, until he's had a chance to recruit, until he's had a chance to implement his style of play. It's really important that the fans get behind this new period for Rangers with new ownership and a new head coach. It's a time for excitement and optimism.
Finally, mate, you were in Saudi Arabia with Stephen, and he was linked with a return. Did you talk about it? Was it ever on the cards?
No, we never spoke about it, to be honest. I think Stephen has come out and said that he obviously wants to take a period of time with his family, and he's becoming a grandfather this summer, which is a wonderful family thing for him. And so, no, I don't think it was ever on the cards. And as I say, we're all behind Russell as Rangers supporters and fans, and wish him the very best.
So that was Mick Beale speaking to me just a short time ago. He's right, Simon, when he says, look, give the guy a chance.
That's not how it works.
He hasn't even got in yet. Give him time to recruit.
Well, sure, absolutely. But that's not how it works. You don't go to a big football club, constantly tell everyone it's a big football club, and then tell people to manage their expectations. That's not how it works. You take a big job like Rangers, you're expected to hit the ground running. You're not interested. Nobody's interested in the backstory. More pragmatic people might be, but most emotive football fans that go to see their side win, specifically teams like Rangers, expect to see a new ownership hit the ground effectively, because these are not inexperienced football operators that know the way around.
Sure.
So they expect them to hit the ground effectively, provide some more working capital to buy players, and the manager to be fit for purpose from the first whistle. So if he wants to bake in dispensation for shortcomings, then he of all people should know that's not going to happen. So you can ask for it. But if you have an ambitious football club, people will expect instantaneously that a manager comes through the door to make things better. Russell Martin's job is to hit the ground running. There will be no latitude. There will be no dispensation for him starting slowly because he's a new manager under a new regime.
Yeah, and he played there in the past. But he says, and he knows this, I think, Simon. He says in a quote ahead of the press conference this morning, I had a taste of how special this club is, the expectation, the passion and the history. He knows it. He gets it. And he's saying that in the short statement that he's made this morning.
Yeah, I mean, saying something and actually being able to respond to it and affect an outcome are two different things. He has to back himself. He has to believe in himself. He's a football manager. Most of these football managers have got brass necks left, right and centre. They'll have no problem feeling anything about themselves until it comes on top. And then we'll see what they're really cut out to be like. I think he's quite a strong character. Despite my reservations, because I don't admire people, I don't think it's clever to stick to your principles. If your principles aren't working, it's important to have a value set. It's important to have standards, of course. But if you've got players that aren't capable of doing something, and you're insisting that they do it because those are your principles, then what use of that is that to anybody?
Yeah.
You've got to be able to adapt, pivot, have more than one game plan, resource the players that you've got. If you've got the best players in the world, like Pep Guardiola's had the luxury of having, you can coach that team by having the best players that are for self-starters, full stop anyway, and position them the way that you want, because they've got the mentalities and the capabilities. If you've got lesser players, then you surely have to look at the reality of what you're trying to achieve from them and build and build and build and build and build, and keep building rather than sticking to a philosophy of saying, well, if I want to play this way, it's the right way to play. So when you say as a coach, I admire someone that sticks to their principles. Yeah, we all admire people that have decent principles. But if your principles ain't working and they're not worth anything, what's the point of having them?
No doubt. He'll be asked that this morning. Head coach rather than manager? Is that significant?
Well, it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, his primary job is to produce a football team.
Yeah.
Whether he's sitting in a room negotiating contracts and whether he gets some glorified title that was probably, vacated in the 70s.
Yeah.
In terms of people, what they really do inside a football club, they're coaches.